So we are continuing to talk about problem solving. And we talked last week about engineers and how that's a job that a lot of people have, and how everything in our world, technology-wise, works to solve a problem. Please sit down. I'll read it right now. So on page 16, it talks about an engineering problem, so let's follow along. It says part of an engineering problem is identifying the constraints. You can see that word is in yellow in your workbook. It's important to understand. Constraints are the limits on the resources that you can use to solve a problem. People never have endless amounts of time, money, or other resources to solve a problem, which makes sense. Money doesn't grow on trees. We don't all have $1 million trillion that we can spend. And also think about time. There's only 24 hours in the day. You can't do everything every single day. We don't have enough time. So let's look at the picture. You can see we're talking about astronauts working for NASA. It says NASA engineers think about constraints to make decisions. Trips to the International Space Station, so they shorten that to the ISS, the International Space Station, can only carry so much weight. Each item on board has an allowable weight. If an astronaut gains 1 kilogram before a flight, then 1 kilogram of something else must be left behind. Constraints are absolute limits, not just desirable features. So it says, if you were an astronaut flying up into space in the spaceship that they give you, they only can allow a certain amount of weight. So if they say that we can only bring, if they say only 2,000 pounds are allowed on the plane, on the spaceship, and when you apply to be an astronaut and they ask you how much you weigh, let's say, for example, you say, I weigh 50 pounds, then that means that you can only bring supplies like food and water and other things that add up to 1,500 pounds. Well, let's say you apply right before Christmas and you weigh 50 pounds, and then Christmas comes, and I don't know about you, but I eat a lot of Christmas cookies around Christmas and Christmas break. They're everywhere. They're delicious. So let's say after eating Christmas cookies, now you weigh 60 pounds when you go back to the spaceship, and they weigh you, and they say, oh, you've been eating too many cookies, and you say, it's Christmas time. I love Christmas cookies. They're delicious. So after that, if you weighed 60 pounds, then you could only bring 1,940. So because you weigh more, you can bring less. A constraint is a limitation that you have. So we talked about this last week. If you wanted an iPad and you had $50 and it cost $100, a constraint, a limit would be you only have $50. You can't go to the store and say, I only have $50. Is that okay? They're not going to say, okay, that's fine. We'll take your $50. Even though it's $100, we'll just take your 50. You're fine. That's not how buying things works. You have to have what they ask for. So if you don't have enough, that's called a constraint. So looking at this picture of the astronaut, it says, is the space that an item takes up a criterion or a constraint? So thinking about being on a spaceship, is the space you have going to be endless? You can have as much space in the ship as you want, Or is it going to be a constraint? We only have a certain amount. What do you think? Are you going to have endless amounts of space? It's going to be a constraint because they say you can only bring up to this amount of weight. So that doesn't mean I could bring 10,000 pounds of chocolate milk, because if I can only bring 2,000, that means I can't go above that number. So underneath that picture, you'll see a sentence. So look at that picture. Don't look at me, look at your workbook, look at the picture of the spaceship. You'll see there's a sentence underneath it. It says astronauts don't have bedrooms on the ISS. They use small sleeping bags as shown. So you can see that guy, it looks like he's standing straight up, but that's a sleeping bag on the spaceship. Is the amount of space for sleeping a criterion or a constraint? Elise just told us it's a constraint. So take your pencil and circle the word constraint. It's the last word in that sentence. Under the picture at the way bottom, circle the last word constraint.